Give me a child until the age of 7, and I will give you the man.
Our series will take you on a journey of discovery, a journey that will help us unlock the mystery that is concealed within each child's development. A journey that reveals the critical role this development plays in the formation of man. Each adult has not always been a grown-up person. It was the child who constructed the adult personality. Man has discovered flight. He has discovered pearls in the shells of oysters, gold in the mountains, and coal in the bowels of the earth. But unfortunately, he has failed to discover the child. Dr. Maria Montessori understood the child's development by observing it, and through her observations, she found that the child, like every other living organism, passes through successive stages of development. Just who was this woman? Maria Montessori was born in 1870 in the small town of Chiaravalle in eastern Italy, a province of Ancona. Her father, Alessandro Montessori, was descended from a noble family from Bologna. He was a typical conservative of the old school, a military man who in his time has been commended for bravery in action. Dr. Montessori's mother was Renilde Stoppani, niece of the illustrious Antonio Stoppani, the great philosopher, scientist, priest, to whom the University of Milan erected a monument at his death. At an early age, Maria Montessori showed an interest in those less fortunate than herself. As a child, she would knit garments for the poor. Maria Montessori's childhood was spent in Ancona, where she attended the usual state day school. At the age of 12, her parents moved to Rome so as to be able to give their only child a better education than Ancona could offer. Maria Montessori was ahead of her time. At the age of 13, she began to attend a boys' technical school where she studied engineering. Later, she decided on a medical career, the first woman medical student in Italy. Though her father strongly disapproved of the line she had taken, her mother never doubted her ability to make good in the path she had chosen. Renilde was Maria's constant friend and sympathizer, and helped her in every way she could. After 6 years in medical school in Rome, Maria Montessori at the age of 26 became the first woman in Italy to earn a degree in medicine, gaining a double honours degree as Doctor of Medicine and Doctor of Surgery. She was probably one of the few women in Europe at that time to become a doctor in the Faculty of Medicine. In 1896, the same year that she received her medical degree, Maria Montessori made her first journey outside Italy. She was chosen to speak at a feminist congress in Berlin on a subject very close to her heart: why women should be given equal pay for equal work. Here she championed the cause of the working women. Dr. Montessori had no fear of the audience. She stood up to give her first public speech without any notes. Her vibrant way of delivering her thoughts and opinions captured her audience and was to do so every time she was to talk in public. A few years later, she attended a similar congress in London. Here she attacked the practice of employing child labour in the mines of Sicily. From the beginning, it seems that Maria Montessori was always fighting on behalf of the underdog. Maria, along with other members of the Congress, attended a function hosted by Queen Victoria whilst in London. For nearly 15 years, Dr. Montessori practiced medicine and held the professional chair for hygiene and anthropology. And it was in the course of her professional contact with children that she became interested in education. In fact, in 1906, in her middle-30s, she renounced all her positions in order to dedicate herself to the study and education of young children. As a physician, Dr. Montessori was in touch with young children and became profoundly interested in their development. She discovered that children construct their own personalities as they interact with their environment. Maria Montessori's first observations came from a classroom of children from the slums of Rome. These children lived in run-down apartment blocks. And while their parents were at work and their brothers and sisters were at school, they vandalized, breaking anything that could be broken. These children between the ages of 3 and 6 were left until late at night to fend for themselves. It was in January the 6th, 1907, when Dr. Montessori first introduced herself to these unfortunate children and welcomed them to the first Casa dei Bambini, the first children's house. It was through observing these children that she learnt about their development. She found that these deprived children, when encouraged, had a spontaneous interest in learning and a spontaneous self-discipline. So it was here at the first Casa dei Bambini where Montessori education was born and where the world began to realize the importance of this education philosophy. Maria Montessori previously worked with handicapped children in institutions where they had been placed to keep them out of the way of the rest of society. Most people regarded handicapped children as impossible to educate. Dr. Maria Montessori proved them wrong. Instead of the usual teaching method, Maria Montessori designed sensory materials to give the children a chance to learn through touch, sight, smell, and sound. This way, she enabled them to reach the same standards and pass the same exams as normal children. It was Maria Montessori more than any other person who, through her observations, discovered that the life of the child demanded an education that was ordered, creative, and distinctively personal. Although Pestalozzi, Froebel, Rousseau, Dewey, and Piaget have each made their contributions, none of them had such a global influence as Dr. Montessori. Both Froebel and Montessori were aiming at the same thing: the education of the child through self-activity. Dr. Montessori has been successful in achieving this aim. The Swiss educator Johann Pestalozzi, who shared her educational ideas, also believed that the purpose of education is to ensure the full development of each student's unique abilities. Like Maria Montessori, he thought that education should aim for the intellectual, physical, and moral development of the individual. Pestalozzi also felt that children could best learn in an atmosphere of love and freedom rather than by harsh discipline. He also believed that children learn from doing rather than simply memorizing facts. Elizabeth Hainstock, the author of Essential Montessori, said when she first read about the Montessori philosophy and method, she was immediately attracted by its logical, common-sense approach. It also helped her to see her children as individuals. On her first visit to the United States in 1913, Dr. Montessori was hosted by some of her strongest supporters. People such as Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, and Helen Keller. She was entertained at the White House and lectured to capacity crowds at Carnegie Hall. It is worth noting that Mrs. Alexander Graham Bell and Margaret Woodrow Wilson founded the first Montessori Educational Association in the same year. A few years later, she visited England, inaugurating an international Montessori training course in London. Her work later spread into many countries, taking her beyond Italy, England and the United States, to Latin America, India, Pakistan, and throughout Western Europe. Maria Montessori lived through both world wars. With the rise of fascism in Italy, Dr. Montessori was forced to go to Spain. With the rise of Franco, she was forced out of Spain and went to Holland. And with the rise of Hitler and the German occupation of Holland, she went to India, where she stayed for 7 years, only to return to Holland, where she lived until her death in 1952.
Mancavo dall'Italia fino dal 1934, l'anno in cui hanno chiuso tutte le scuole col mio metodo. Rimasi in Europa fino al 1939, poi dopo sono andata in India e lì sono rimasta per 7 anni, dei quali per 5 anni fui internata come nemico italiano. Io non potevo andare nei vari luoghi, ma venivano da tutte le parti gli indiani a me e in questo modo ho potuto preparare circa 1500 maestri.
Her concern with education for peace intensified, and she was twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Today, in Montessori schools all over the world, her teachings still lead the way for the many of us who believe in the overwhelming influence on the development of the child's human potential.
The task of the child is to construct a man, adapted to his environment, his time, place and culture.
If we think of the child at birth and the child at 3 years of age, what an immense difference there is between them. What an enormous change has taken place. This is the secret of childhood. The philosophy of Montessori education lies in the recognition that an individual passes through a number of stages during development. The Montessori philosophy allows the child to develop naturally and spontaneously according to individual needs, and creates for the child a perfect environment in which the development can take place. In this specially prepared environment, the child has access to certain apparatus, each designed to help the child on the path to total development. In their environment, the children have the opportunity to observe. Children have an opportunity to judge for themselves and to discover and be able to correct their own mistakes. Children are able to choose their own work and finish it. In their environment, children have the opportunity to develop their will, therefore being able to control it in a social environment. Nature's law is a force that governs everything in the universe. To understand how it governs the development phases of humans, we take you through some thoughts how it all works in plants and animals. While essentially we are going to discuss the development of humans, we must touch on that of plants and animals, because that will give us a greater understanding of the high qualities that humans have. Qualities that plants and animals lack. It would be fair to say that plants mainly grow from seeds. When Montessori children dissect flowers, they find, amongst other miracles, the eggs in the ovary. Another part of the pistil beside the ovary is the stigma. The male parts of the flowers produce pollen. For pollen to finish up on the stigma, insects and wind play a role. So there are the seeds, the growth, the maturity, the fertilization. The plan is always in the same sequence. So much happens in the plant life that goes unseen by humans. None of us would know how to direct a microscopic grain of pollen to the stigma of a flower of the same species. It is amazing that the pollen grain will only grow a root to an egg in the ovary of the same species, despite the fact that the grains of pollen may land on the stigmas of other flowers. Everything works perfectly without human interference. The provisions by nature are true miracles, and that the things that really matter, the essential life force, is operating invisibly in each individual, unseen by the eyes of observers. So much happens that we do not understand, and yet our very lives depend on it. If anyone does not believe in the nature forces, does that mean that the sun will not come up tomorrow? Is gravity not a sheer miracle? The whole of animal life is regulated by instincts, whereas a human baby, deprived of an environment with a human voice, will not learn to speak. A puppy taken away from dogs at birth will still bark. Dr. Montessori reasons that man appeared during the Ice Age totally deprived of any of the physical attributes that animals have, such as speed, covering, claws, superior smelling organs and tusks. Nature had a great scheme in mind. man had been endowed with the potentials of higher psychic qualities. He was hungry, cold, and he had a family to feed. By observation of the animals and by trial and error and correcting his errors, he copied large teeth in the form of a spear and clothed himself with the hide of animals. Animals have their lives regulated by instincts. They act instinctively. Nature has provided for the development of caterpillars by endowing them with instincts. The mother butterfly lays her eggs in a safe and sheltered spot on the branch of a tree. What will tell the tiny caterpillars when they break out of their eggs that the tender leaves which they need for food are above them at the end of the branch? Light attracts them, and as a consequence, the tiny worms inch the way up to the end of the branch where there is the most light. There, among the tender leaves, they find the food to satisfy their hunger. So, nature's way of solving the caterpillar's feeding problem, it is sensitive to light. The remarkable fact is that just as soon as a caterpillar has grown large enough to eat coarser food, its sensitive period passes and it loses its sensitivity to light. Humans have been endowed over and above the animal with potential psychic qualities. Humans have potential inherited characteristics. So what are these qualities that humans have which are not so prevalent in the rest of the animal world? Reason, compassion, abstraction, decision-making, willpower, consideration, recognition of own mistakes, and thinking. All these characteristics, as well as the physical ones, go through a specific period of development. The child's natural timetable must be respected. That is nature's law. That is the freedom Dr. Montessori refers to. Children must be free to develop all the faculties naturally, driven by their own sensitive period of development. The child who is more perfectly developed is a more disciplined person because he can use his faculties for the right purpose. Therefore, Dr. Montessori says, to obtain discipline, give freedom. The children sing a delightful song concerning the development stages of a being. This song shows us that each development stage follows another. At the end, there is a pot of beans, and the Lord has blessed my garden. In the Montessori environment, the stages of the child's development are known and respected. Dr. Montessori says, to develop these stages, the child needs motive for activity. Therefore, in the Montessori environment, there are specially designed apparatus to answer the need of a child to do an activity that will assist his development. The activity is only a key to that development. Dr. Montessori often talks about the visitor to a Montessori school who asked the little girl, "Is it true that in this school you are allowed to do anything you like?" Her reply was, "I don't know about that, but I do know that we like what we do." Children in a Montessori school are given an environment that assists them in the development of all the human spheres, according to their own potential. It is possible to be independent without being free, but it is not possible to be truly free without having first achieved independence as a basis. The child's path towards independence starts at birth. Each child is genetically programmed with the potential to learn and the potential to retain what is learned. If nothing would be retained every day, every experience would be new. No progress of civilization as we like to see it would be possible. Nature prepares indirectly for successive stages of development. At birth, the child leaves his mother's womb, and this makes him independent of her bodily processes. 6 months or so after, the child can live without his mother's milk. Before this, the child was dependent entirely on maternal milk. It is only now at 6 months that the stomach begins to secrete the hydrochloric acid necessary for digestion of food other than mother's milk. The appearance of teeth tells us also the child can now start to eat. This happens at the same time as the hydrochloric acid develops in the stomach. Around 9 months, children start to crawl or slide themselves along on hands and feet. After, the child is sure on its legs. But unless the spinal nerves were complete, which convey orders to the muscles of the legs, these orders cannot be delivered. The bones of the legs have to harden enough before the child can try to stand on them. And the cerebellum, at the base of the brain, should be developed enough to give balance. The bones of the head that were not jointed at the time of birth now grow together and become joined. If the child falls then, there is no longer the serious risk of damaging the brain. A most impressive further step on the child's path of independence is when the child learns to speak and no longer depends on others to guess its needs. So, man develops by stages, and the freedom he enjoys comes from these steps towards independence taken in sequence. It is nature that bestows the sequence of the developing periods. Remember the pot of beans? Man can only assist nature by providing a perfect environment before and after birth. So, let's now examine what freedom means in a Montessori environment. The child works towards independence of body and mind by means of work. If any period of development is destroyed, physically or psychically, the child does not have that trait. And because every development stage comes only once in a lifetime, the problems caused are quite enormous. When children are naughty, it means that there is an obstacle to their smooth development. The adult must reflect on this and remove the obstacle, rather than punish the child. After all, the naughtiness of the child is only a reaction to the obstacle. Freedom for children means that they must be allowed to answer the life forces that urge them to develop themselves to the full. Because he still has to construct his will, the child cannot possibly do what he likes. This independence and freedom is not simply a question of Montessori philosophy, but of life. Children could not be truly free if they were merely abandoned by adults and left to their own devices. Such freedom would be suitable for animals but not for children. A prepared environment achieves this for children, offering them motives for activities that they need to develop themselves. Freedom lies therefore in the total development, because all parts have developed to perfection. In a Montessori class, you will find an environment prepared with child-size furnishings. Lots of self-correcting learning apparatus on shelves. And children free to choose activities they need to do. Working singly or in small groups within a 3-year span. This freedom allows the child to grow in a social grace, inner discipline and joy. It is freedom which allows each child to work on his own development at his own individual pace. Children are allowed to occupy themselves with any material, only so long as they keep on using it in the correct way. The many pieces of apparatus designed as a key to excite the senses become available to the child after a lesson on how to use the equipment. These apparatus are properly presented to the child by the directress before the child begins to explore their use. These apparatus are numerous, and each has its specific purpose. There is only one of each piece of apparatus in the room, an indirect lesson of patience and consideration, social development. Having only one of each apparatus in the room makes it obvious to the children that they must wait until the item is available. Over time, this becomes an automatic response. And the children develop patience and respect. The nature of the apparatus also extends an invitation to repeat the exercise. And above all, the child's senses are refined and the brain directs the child's muscle movement. The hands are the instruments of man's intelligence, doing things with their hands as well as their brains. Activity is the key. Montessori understands that by doing, the children learn with their muscles. The work they do establishes itself in the muscular memory. Children must be let free to repeat things in order to learn and fulfill their need to accumulate experiences. A child needs to complete what Dr. Montessori called the child's cycle of activity. These periods of concentration on a particular task that should be worked to completion. Not to allow this causes the developing child great frustration. It is the inner need that compels the child to work so long and hard at a particular task, long after the older child or adult would have lost interest and grown weary. The Montessori child is actually learning and not just memorizing. The children work with enthusiasm at their chosen jobs. So the child in a Montessori class learns to choose. The child learns to make decisions, learns to recognize mistakes, learns that it is okay to correct the mistakes. The child learns to contemplate. The materials allow the children to explore the world through the various senses. Lessons allow the children to gain self-mastery, knowing how to do things themselves, and through the successful completion of work that is meaningful to the children. The practical life jobs offered to Montessori children initially when they are 3 to 6 years, such as sweeping, polishing, and washing windows, enable them to develop themselves through real work. In the prepared Montessori environment, the children are carefully shown how to do these practical life jobs and are then able to do them in their own time as often as they need to. The practical life jobs answer the real need within the child. Through constructive activity, the children develop, amongst other things, concentration and perseverance. The first essential for children's development is concentration. It lays the whole basis for their character and social behavior. The children must find out how to concentrate. And for this they need things to concentrate upon. A Montessori class is a place in which the children find the kind of environment that permits them to develop their concentration. If the children are inspired, they concentrate. They educate themselves. As soon as children find something that interests them, they lose their instability and learn to concentrate. Concentration is fundamental for development. The apparatus which the child chooses is significant. It is a form of self-expression, by means of which we can follow the child's development. For the child expresses his needs better by choice than by words. While children naturally choose to compete in various aspects of their lives, it is a negative factor for their development if adults impose competition on them in their lives. It is by no means the competitive spirit that brings one to the top. It is the attitude, understanding, and the ability to choose and concentrate. It takes self-discipline. That is what Montessori allows to develop. In a Montessori school, rewards do not exist. When a child puts his soul in his work, that is reflected in that work. The child glows and looks satisfied. We share this happiness, making sure it is not a reward. The focus is always on the child, not the job. The satisfaction that we share in this happiness encourages the child to repeat the job. The child needs more development to achieve more accuracy. If at that moment you would give the child a reward, it would become unnecessary to do it again. And if you say it is not good enough, the child will also not do it again. The tiny child starts toddling uncertainly on her feet. Wobbles and falls, but ends by walking easily. The child corrects his errors by growth and experience. When early man saw animals endowed with long sharp weapons on their heads with which to kill the prey, man copied this tool and it became a spear. But it would not have helped him if the headmaster had caned him or gave him a low mark because the spear went astray and did not hit the target. The essence of the man wanting to improve is that he was aware that the spear missed. His family went hungry. Man in his early stages and now a child only learns when he recognizes his mistakes and is left at liberty to correct them himself. If the child wishes to paint, this will satisfy an inner need and assist in her development. If she paints because someone will give her a reward for doing so, what she wants is the reward and not the painting. Both the reward and the painting are devalued.